Great. Well, thanks for joining us today for our Career Conversations podcast. And today we're very excited to welcome Dr. Nicholas Ball, who was a Beckman Scholar back in 2002, which launched his scientific career. And so we're very excited to speak with you today, Nick, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's great to be here.
So really like to start sort of all the way back at the beginning. If you could just let us know, what was the first experience you had with science where you started to say, I think this is really for me. I'm interested in pursuing science as a career.
That's a great question. So when I had started at Macalester, the summer before we actually started classes, we did a bridge program through the Howard Hughes Medical Institute grant. And we had a class in organic chemistry, philosophy, other different classes. And Professor Brisbois, who is a chemistry professor at Macalester, taught the organic class. And it was fine. Like I think I did fine. But when we came back in the fall, Professor Brisbois was like, "Hey, it seemed like you liked organic chemistry, so you enjoyed that little mini class over the summer. Would you be do you have work study?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I have work study. I was planning on signing up, working in the cafeteria or the grounds or whatever." He said, "Well, would you want to do some research?" And I was like, "Well, what is that?" I had no conception of it. And he's like, "Well," he said, "frankly, you're going to be washing dishes for the first semester, but if you continue on, you get to observe how you actually do the chemistry, some of the chemistry that you learned in that mini course." And at that time, uh, uh, Matt Mayo, who's now a professor at University of Detroit Mercy, was a postdoc there, and I kind of was underneath his wing and learning how to do chemistry, and I just really loved it. Yeah, I always loved cooking as a kid, and so seeing how you kind of throw what looks like solids and liquids and like cool things happen um, really got me interested. The other thing I would say, maybe what got me into chemistry, yeah, always wanted to do biology. I never wanted to be a doctor, but I think the idea of understanding what happens in your body was fascinating to me. And it was a first year reading course that we took. It was taught by the late Jan Siri, and she was teaching about genetic disorders. We were reading a book about it. And I kept asking these questions. What is this blob doing in this blob? And then something happens. And she's like, "Nick, you need to be a chemistry major. You're asking,
Chemistry.
yeah, you're asking things on the molecular level." And so I just really kind of leaned into it after that.
Yeah, and so then you became a Beckman Scholar.
Hmm.
So you must have had to apply for that through your school. Like, what really got you
Yeah.
motivated to reach out for that opportunity?
So I had no idea about it, and Professor Brisbois brought it to my attention. He's like, "Hey, you should apply for this Beckman thing," and I believe I I want to say maybe the summer beforehand I applied for a Pfizer internship and didn't get it. So I was like, "Well, I don't know. It's summer research. I like doing research in Professor Brisbois' lab. So you should apply." And so I can't remember all the details behind it because honestly, it was almost 20 something odd years ago. But I do remember being in a room and having an interview and thought I completely bombed it. As a matter of fact, I thought at that time, my mind was thinking, "Oh, there's way more qualified, smarter students out there who's also applying for it." And I thought it was like the shock of my life when I actually heard that I got it. And so, we went in my second year, I went to the Beckman Symposium, and really from there on, I've been really involved with the Beckman um, Foundation. So it's been really good.
What did you do after undergrad? And how did you think about that transition and what might be interesting?
That's a great question. I think for me, at that time, I would say I graduated around 2005. So around 2004, if you really want to kind of push science with a bachelor's in chemistry at that time, it was a little limited about what you can do in industry, right? So for me to be able to kind of push a little bit more, and actually, quite frankly, earned what I thought would be a more decent income. Um, I I don't know. I think to be quite frank with you, and I'll be honest, I think I wasn't ready for a job. The idea of a job was a little intimidating. And when it was told to me that grad school was free and they paid for it, I was like, oh, I get to put off making a
For
career
years.
decision. Yeah, I get to put off a career decision and go to grad school. It was interesting enough, and I'm in the age of life when I tell these stories and certain things like, oh God, this is really dating me. So when I was thinking about applying to grad school, I talked to my parents about it. Like, does it cost money? I said no. They said go for it. So um, uh, 2 years before me in the Brisbane lab was a student. Her name is Cami Hull. She's now a professor at University of Texas, Austin. And at that time, she had started at Michigan grad school. And she's like, Nick, I heard you applying for grad school. You have to apply to Michigan. You have to apply to Michigan. I said, Tammy, listen, I've been in Minnesota for 4 years. I'm from Tennessee. I want to go to California. Funny enough, I want to go to California and do something different. I don't want to do any more metal chemistry. And she's like, well, there's this person named Melanie Sanford. She's super, super cool. I think you would really, really like that lab. And Michigan's a really great environment. Coming from a small liberal arts school and going to a big university would be a really good transition. I was like, I don't know, Cammy, I'm kind of tired of snow. And she's like, you know what? Guess what? This is the first year that instead of mailing in the applications, we have to mail in our application. It got sent through FedEx, and we'll pray it got there on time. This is the first year to have an online application. So if you do the online application, it's free. If you apply by mail, it's like 40, $50. And so I'm, undergraduate, I don't have a lot of money. So I was like, sure, I'll apply. It's free. I'll apply to it. And when I visited different campuses, all of them were wonderful. But when I was at Michigan, I really felt like I've learned if I listen to my intuition, it usually is a good indicator of where I need to be. And I went to Michigan, like something felt like this was the right place to be. And it really turned out to be an excellent decision.
Great that you had like an older student to look up to.
Mhm.
Um, can you talk like how did your undergrad professor did they help at all with that as well? What kind of mentorship did you seek out, discussing these options? Or was
Yeah,
that
I mean, I give all thanks to I would say I've had some of I lucked out and went to one of the most supportive, even to this. I mean, I love the most supportive chemistry department I've ever could imagine going to. I still talk to them like they're now my colleagues. And the Professor Brisboy, um, he gave me some ideas about where I could apply and gave some ideas about schools. I really had no idea. And I think he had connections at Irvine. He helped me think about, and also Illinois at that time. And I think he helped me just kind of branch out and think about applying to places that geographically I would have never thought about in my life. But he had an idea about where the good departments were at that time. So I really kind of leaned onto him at that time. Also, Professor Becky Hoy was one of my other organic professors, and I really respected um, her opinions, and I think she gave some really good insight about schools that we would, the big name schools we all kind of think about. But she's like, don't get so regaled by the name. It's also about like how the environment is there. So you have to consider that as well. So when I went on my interviews, um, and visited campuses, I heard their voices in my head about kind of how to choose a good place.
Yeah. What happened through grad school? Were you able to work on different types of research? You said you wanted to leave the metals behind, but did they suck you
Yeah,
in?
it sucked me right back in. As a matter of fact, Michigan at that time was unique and had a rotation program. So rotations in graduate school, my understanding, were really more of a chem bio biological sciences grad school experience, and the chemistry was pretty new. And so at Michigan, I rotated through three different labs. So my first one was Professor Sanford's lab, and then I was in Professor Masters, which was more like polymorphs and think about uh, like the solid state forms of explosives. So I actually made TNT in that lab and kind of made crystal. It was interesting. And then I worked with Professor John Montgomery, which is nickel catalysis. So two out of three was still metals. And I think I was just kind of fascinated by the idea of really understanding how something works. So I ended up joining the Sanford group because at the very beginning they had quite a bit of success with CH activation and understanding how to convert a carbon hydrogen bond to many other really interesting functional groups. And the idea is like, okay, the big pie in the sky, you can take methane and make methanol. And if you selectively choose a carbon hydrogen bond, that would be really, really fantastic. So they actually, fun enough, Camry Hall had developed a catalytic reaction in which you convert a carbon hydrogen bond to carbon fluorine. And the idea is that it goes through some higher oxidation palladium species. And Melanie gave me an option. She's like, okay, well, you can join some other lab members' project and kind of help them finish it up, or you can help us figure out if indeed you can make a carbon fluorine bond from this high oxidation state palladium. And I kind of talked to different people in my lab. I was like, oh, it's kind of intimidating to start something out just by myself. But the best advice I received is like, if you were able to do this, like start a project from you and with other people, but you're leading it, that if you're able to make it work, the sense of like achievement, how much you will learn from that would be like phenomenally great. And so, 3 years
If
later,
though, if you can
if
make
if, and I would tell you
if.
at that same time, when you develop a reaction, that's one level, but actually understanding how it happens is actually really challenging. And so I think, oh my gosh, I think let's see, I started grad school in 2005. Nothing started to work until maybe 2007. And in my first project, we got scooped twice. I had to really fight for a year to get my first paper in. Uh, but I will tell you, I learned so much. And after that time, I something clicked around my third year of grad school where I was like, oh, every reaction that I do, I can design. I need to design so that I'm able to be able to find value in all the data points that I have. I was like, I was being, naive in grad school. I was like, I want 80% of the reactions I do to really be pushing the project forward, to really be like something that's getting towards something publishable. And I think I was able to say such a bold statement because I learned so much in that first 3 years of just failure. It's just not working. And it ended up being that I got several papers just from this project that I got that I continued on afterwards, was thinking about carbon CO3 bond formation, actually came out of that 3 years of struggling. So once I kind of discovered kind of one platform, it really exploded from there. So um, it was hard work, a lot of tears at the glove box, but it really paid off really well.
So did you then leave grad school and get a postdoc, or did you ever get that real job?
Eventually I did. So I was like, okay, postdoc, this is the time, try something biologically related. And I've always been fascinated by materials, the idea that you can, make these macromolecular type of things. And that really came from Professor Briscoe, my undergraduate kind of work. We were working on these supramolecular construction of organic molecules. So we were taking these uh, two arrow rings with a triple bond in the middle, these bis arrow ethynes, and you can do metal catalyzed reactions to make these really complex supramolecular structures, which in one sense, that's a material, right? And so when I was thinking about a postdoc, I actually went to one of my thesis committee members, Professor Matsker, the one I rotated a lab through, and he's in materials. And I said, Professor Matsker, I really think I want to do materials, maybe something biological. And he had suggested Dave Terrell, who's at Caltech. And what was really cool about Dave Terrell is that he started off as a polymer chemist, a classic polymer chemist, and then moved into chemical biology and biomolecular chemistry and able to think about artificial amino acid tagging and really doing proteomic metabolomic type of things using click chemistry. So after that, and those are requirements is that I want someone who is good at training students, someone who's like respected in the field, and place I will learn a lot. So by some well, I won't say it's miraculous, I guess. Dave saw something in my application he was really excited about. And yeah, I went to Caltech and was fortunate to get an NIH postdoctoral fellowship. So I went there with funding and I learned a lot about chemistry and water. And it's not easy. So I help us out quite a bit. But I learned how to think about actually selenium-based kind of biopolymers and doing some cool type of chemistry to functionalize selenium surfaces to then create kind of like these olefins in which you can do like click chemistry. So you can click things into them and make redox active or responsive kind of materials. And yeah, and so then it was at Caltech that I went on the job market and I asked Dave, it's like, I don't know what to do, the industry, academia, or whatever. And he gave really great advice. He said, Nick, when I was going up for jobs, I went academia, had industrial interviews and academic interviews. I would have been successful in either one of them. He's like, he helped me think about whether or not I wanted to, he said, you deserve to look at all the possibilities you can. And I contacted Melanie Sanford, and she's like, "Yeah, Nick, you work too hard not to look at all the possibilities." So I applied for academic jobs, and I applied for industrial jobs. I went to the industrial sites, and I loved it. It was one with the agrochemical company, one with the classic polymer company, and I think at the end of the day, I was like, "Oh, it'd be so cool if like students knew about this." So it kind of got to the point where I thought, well, let me try the academic thing, and if I decide I don't want to do it again, I can do industry. Which, interestingly enough, my sabbatical this year is at Pfizer in Groton, Connecticut. So I've done a 360 and got back to it.
Yeah. But what do you think about being a professor then? Do you feel like that's a good fit for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the central tenets that that motivates me as a professor, I've been very fortunate at the Claremont colleges, and particularly at Pomona, is what's called a research college. So it's really a focus on, in order for us to progress in our career, we have to have research productivity. That's similarly to a different scale, but similar to like a research university. So there's a lot of resources, and now we have 3 different chemistry departments, so many different colleagues to kind of talk to chemistry with. So research wise, I've been able to have really fortunate to have great resources to kind of push that forward. Then also I have excellent students and wonderful colleagues who push me to think about pedagogically how I teach my classes, but also have me think about um, research and service and being a part of a college community. I will say one of the key things that drives everything that I do is this idea that I'll make a bold statement and say chemistry is not hard. And what I mean by that is that everyone has the capability of learning and understanding components of chemistry and engaging with it. And um, and also think about my intersection as being African American is thinking about how for so long science has been not has we have been not been able to be in spaces to learn science. And now that I am there, every I want everyone to kind of know as much of science as they want to know, right? I teach organic chemistry, and we all know how, I teach organic and inorganic, but with especially with organic, I think there's a lot of pressure that it decides your life and everything like that. But my goal is to have students really discover that they can learn something difficult, that they can be supported doing that, that they can learn things, that their learning isn't just about them. When they learn something, they should pass it forward. And really, that is how we do the best part of our job and do the best science. And if I can create an environment where in class the student feels engaged, they feel like they belong and feel like they can contribute and learn from each other, that's all I want to do. And I think capturing that in the classroom, in the research lab, in our department and college environment, I think is paramount to making sure that if anyone wants to engage in science, they can, you know? And I also think being transparent, that it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of failure, and also it takes some level of releasing yourself to the process. How you learned before might require you to learn differently. Doesn't mean you're not able to do it, but we're all being pushed to challenge how we learn and how we know what we know. And instead of thinking that that is a process to make you feel like you don't know something, think about it as a process to help you unlock new ways in which you can discover your actual capabilities. So I think that has been really the most edifying part of my job, is to help students see that, and actually, quite frankly, help. A part of that was working with myself and also helping my other colleagues see that I think we, especially in chemical education, there's a lot of I think we want tools, and I think tools are incredibly helpful. But sometimes I think too it's helpful for us to think about how we as an educator bring ourselves into the classroom, and what are ways, and not only we bring ourselves, but also help students bring themselves in the classroom. Because if they're able to do that, then their hearts and their minds are open to learning something that's very, very challenging. Yeah. So that's the part that I really like.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I really loved what you said with, I guess it was Dave Terrell who said, you work so hard, you deserve to try everything. Like,
Yeah,
that's amazing advice. Like, it's really just something you can absorb and internalize. So thank you for sharing that
absolutely.
too.
My pleasure.
So it's been a great chat with you, and we're running up on the end of our time. I just want to give you a last little bit of, is there something else you would say for those that are maybe just thinking about being Beckman scholars, or how
Mm.
did that experience impact your future direction?
There's two things that I've learned. First thing is you don't have something unless you apply and put an effort towards it. So anyone who thinks that they couldn't be a Beckman scholar, I think I share like, oh, there's way more qualified people in the pool. It turns out that if you just try your best and be yourself, you will be surprised. People see that potential when you just put in the effort and just try it. The other thing I've learned is like if you don't, you know, if you don't get it, then there's other ways in which you can learn from that experience. And so, and the one thing I will say is that if you become a Beckman scholar, you are always a part of the Beckman family, right? So I've gone from scholar to reviewing Beckman applications, and I guess next year, I'm going to be the chair of the executive committee of the Beckman Scholars Program. So it is a foundation that I really feel is not only helping people push frontiers of science, but the process and the ways that you all are kind of thinking about how to capture as many scientists as possible and be equitable and fair is really at the forefront, I think, of a foundation, particularly in chemistry. So it makes me very proud to be a part of this foundation and program.
Thank you so much. We'll there on those very kind words. So thank you very
All
much.
right.
And thank you for joining us today. It was great to speak with you today.
My pleasure.